So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacture hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.
Welcome to this week's Energy Show. Now, the solar policies are being attacked all over the world, especially here in the U.S., with the effective cancellation of the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as broken contracts and financial clawbacks on existing solar projects. But, it's not just solar. Environmental attacks are happening almost everywhere we turn. Wind is getting killed. But people are continuing to be passionate about clean air and water, as well as cheap electricity. So just as bad policies attack our environment, good policies are needed to fight back against expensive and polluting fossil fuels. Less drill, baby, drill, and more power to the people with clean, renewable energy. Now, one organization fighting to protect health and environment is the Environmental Working Group, or EWG. Now, it just so happens that we have a good friend at EWG. Her name is Bernadette Del Chiaro, Senior Vice President based in California. Now, if you've been in the solar industry, her name may be familiar to you. She's the former Executive Director of CALSSA, the California Solar and Storage Association, for 12 years, almost 12 years. Previously, she was at Environment California, and now she's shaking things up at EWG with hard-hitting energy and environmental initiatives. So welcome to the show, Bernadette.
Thanks, Barry. It's good to be back.
It's great that you're here. And one of the things that I didn't add is you are like the most powerful, smart, aggressive, tactical policy person in the entire industry. And I just hope you stay here in California and you don't go to work for that bigger organization that starts with an S in Washington, D.C. Tell us a little bit more about EWG.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's great to be with this group. Environmental Working Group is a 30-year-old organization. We're a national nonprofit environmental group funded through mostly private donations. We have been taking on all sorts of big polluters, from big ag to big energy to big toxic food makers. You kind of name it, EWG takes it on, and we take it on behalf of the consumer. So we help arm consumers with information about what they're eating, what they're buying and putting in their home, and also what's powering their home with electricity. And we empower that citizen all across the country, but especially here in California, to fight back and fight for a better living.
So now that there's no more EPA or FDA, we're depending on EWG for a lot of this.
It's a lot of acronyms, but yeah, I think average everyday people have always been at the root of fights for the public interest, and so it's just exciting to be back on this horse and riding into the same battle for rooftop solar that we've all been fighting for so many decades.
It's kind of, I feel like we in California have reinforcements coming down to help us, which is really, really good. Now, I read about one of EWG's new initiatives called Revolt, and we all need to revolt against the expensive, obsolete, and unreliable IOU business model, investor-owned utility business model. How will Revolt work towards this goal?
So it's Revolt with a dash, and that was intentional because what we want is both, of course, invoke the idea of a public uprising, a revolt, but also we need to rethink and redo how we do energy. We need to, as you put it, put power to the people. We need to decentralize our energy, and we need to do it with the consumer in the middle of the equation. I think there are enough people now, especially with the Eaton fire. We're coming up on the anniversary on January 7th. There are enough people now, it's not just a PG&E problem, that realize that we need to wake up and we need to change things. So we're organizing people online through social media channels with Revolt, and we're hoping to move that into the third dimension of real human interaction, tabling at events and getting people engaged and involved and pushing back. It's not about tinkering on the edges. It isn't about just, slightly adjusting the profit percentages for the utilities. We need an absolute rethink and a revolt of our energy system.
Yeah, changing the cost of capital for the utilities by 0.3% isn't exactly going to make a big enough difference. What's the URL? How can people get in touch?
It's re-volt.org, and you'll see us on all the going social media platforms as well. So you'll see lots of our research and data and information through social media.
So that was kind of the first thing that I read when I saw that you went to EWG. Now you're involved in an opening legal brief against the CPUC and related parties, PG&E, SDG&E, and Edison. Tell us a little bit about what this lawsuit is and what may happen with it.
So I'm so excited for many reasons to be with EWG now. But this lawsuit is really sort of one of the things I'm most passionate about. So Environmental Working Group, back in 2023, when that horrible net metering decision was handed down a few months prior, right, in late 2022.
And what was that horrible decision for people that may not be aware of it?
So people are probably pretty aware of what net metering is. It's the ability to put solar on your roof or out in the back 40 and use it to power your own energy needs on site. And anything that's extra, you get a credit sent back to the bill and back to the grid. And that helps you finance your solar system, right? And California has built an amazing market on net metering. It's in fact the largest neighborhood solar sharing program in the world. And the utilities ramped up a huge and hugely successful campaign starting in 2017, but really took hold when Gavin Newsom came into office in 2019 to just completely undo net metering and basically get rid of it. And so in 2022, after many, many years of fighting, the California Public Utilities Commission adopted a decision that just absolutely guts net metering. It basically took that credit that you get for sending energy back to the grid and it almost zeroed it out. It's down to 5 cents. The market plummeted. Lots of businesses went bankrupt. We lost over 17,000 jobs. And we haven't quite recovered. Rooftop solar and the new successor tariff called net billing, it's still worth something. People are still, because of high electricity costs, you just can't keep solar down. But the market is still a fraction of what it once was. And it's all because of this decision. So that was the decision.
Before we go any further, so why did utilities not like net metering? What's it to them?
Well, first of all, net metering is, like I said, the world's most effective policy at driving consumer adoption of solar. So it's not just a little bit successful and effective. It is the most effective policy. So the utilities came after net metering because it was the crowning jewel of the clean energy movement, really. And they came after it because it completely goes against their business model for their customers to generate electricity and share it with their next door neighbor. I mean, I know that sounds obvious, but just to put a finer little point on that, the utilities like PG&E and Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric, they literally make money. The way they make money is by spending money. And what they spend money on is the grid. And so the further away a power plant is, whether it's a solar plant or a wind plant, the more money the utilities make because they have to build the miles and miles and miles of wire. To give you a sense of how big the grid is, PG&E alone, if you strung their wires around the equator, it would wrap the earth 5 times. So they have mastered this build. They're basically a glorified construction company. And so they do not want electricity production and use at the local level because it undercuts them. There's nothing for them to build, right? So net metering being the most effective policy at driving that local distributed in our neighborhoods energy investment was they were threatened. It threatened their profits. And so they came after it, and they had a very sympathetic governor for the first time in over 2 decades. And they went to town, and they broke the law. simplest way to put it. And we'll get into this.
How did they convince the governor to change and abandon the net metering that was put in place by Gray Davis, by Schwarzenegger, and by Jerry Brown? How did they change that trajectory? Because, I mean, we must have installed thousands of megawatts of solar in California.
Yeah, we have installed more rooftop solar than, of course, any other state. But to give you a sense of how much rooftop solar it is, 5 Diablo Canyon nuclear power plants, plus 4 Hoover dams. If you've ever been to Hoover Dam, you know how big that facility is. If you ever have thought about nuclear power plants, they're very big. We have built 5 Diablos and 4 Hoovers, all aggregated together in these little mini rooftop systems. That's how much we've built, and we've only scratched the surface of what could be built in California at this local level.
And it's way more efficient when it's on the roof of the home or the office, because those are the communities in which that power is being used, and you don't lose the efficiency of transmitting. You have to pay for all those transmission lines.
That's right. There's like 50 million ways in which it's more efficient. One of my favorite to point out to people is when you build it locally and use it locally, whether it's in your own home or sharing it with your next door neighbor, you are avoiding having to deliver electrons across great distances. And when you do that, you just immediately boost the efficiency of your solar system about 30% on hot summer days, because we lose up to that amount just transmitting the electrons across great distances. In some ways, when you really think about it, the grid might be something that people in the 1900s really admired, but in the 21st century, we are ready to move on, and it's not working for us anymore. I mean, just look at the wildfires, look at all the problems that come from our use of this sort of this 1900s technology. It's really time to move on, and we'll all be better off. Affordability, efficiency, and safety will be better if we can move into this different direction.
So let's go back to before I interrupted you, let's go back to the politics side of things. How did the trajectory of the California government change away from distributed generation rooftop solar?
Well, it's always more than one answer, but I think the biggest answer is always follow the money. It's just a classic adage, but it's always true. If you add up all the money that the utilities and their supporters have given to the past 3 governors, Schwarzenegger, Brown, and Gavin Newsom, they have given 2/3 of that pot has gone just to one of those 3 governors, and you can guess who that is. So they've really invested. I think it's because Mr. Newsom has done some really good things on other issues. Energy is really not an issue that he cares a whole lot about. He's from San Francisco. Old money. San Francisco is very tight with PG&E. And he came in at a time of, wildfires and blackouts, and he just didn't want it to tank his own personal political career. So he just said, work with my friends here at PG&E, to his agencies and his staff, do whatever they need to keep the lights on. Whatever they need, just give it to them. Because the last thing I want is a blackout on my watch, because that'll tank my political career.
Is that the same Newsom guy that used to be the mayor of San Francisco, and he got the San Francisco Solar Initiative put in place? Is that the same guy?
It is the same person.
My daughter still has the pen from his signing of that. So it's the same guy, huh?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. That was a landmark campaign to shut down a dirty fossil fuel power plant and replace it with clean rooftop solar. Really landmark policy idea. And he helped champion that. And we built a lot of jobs, and a lot of new solar companies sprung up around that policy in San Francisco. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, a lot of good companies. I'll drink to that.
Yeah. But, politics is, it's messy business, and it can change people. And unfortunately, I think the public sees through this, right? The public sees that something is terribly broken with our energy system. And I think what people can understand is that, yes, the utilities are kind of the mastermind behind this. But what I think is the greatest, who's at the greatest amount of fault is the government. Because the Public Utilities Commission, it's their job to rein in the utilities and protect consumers from the profit motive and the greed and the short-term thinking of these utilities. You know, PG&E and the other utilities are really, they're doing what's quite rational, right? They're just trying to make as much money.
I don't like them, but I can't blame them.
They're trying to make as much money as fast as possible. And we could all hate them for that. But this is sort of the system we have created, right? What's broken right now is that the government is supposed to be there to protect the consumer. And they're not. They're captured and they're rogue. And this is what our lawsuit, which we'll hopefully get into, it goes right after the heart of that problem.
So let's get into the lawsuit, but I've heard a lot about this cost shift argument, and the utilities seem to have really embedded that in the minds of a lot of people in California. And I've got friends who say, yeah, I don't like solar because of the cost shift. What is that argument? Is it flawed, and how does it relate to the lawsuit?
Yeah. It's absolutely flawed. It is a myth, but it has become so oft repeated that it has become kind of like gospel. You know, people take it on faith, and people don't stop and think about it critically. There's one factor that I think helps to kind of pull the curtains back for people, and that is that over the past 20 years, California's demand for electricity from the grid, from PG&E and the other utilities, has been flat. Okay, so we've had flat demand, both at peak in the hot summer and year-round, flat demand for 20 years, despite population growth, increased temperatures, economic growth. We're now the 4th largest economy. When I first got started, we were the 5th largest economy in the world, and increased electronics, right? Everything from personal computers to cell phones to electric cars. Yep. An enormous amount of increased use of electricity, but it has not translated into demand for PG&E's product. Okay, so that is shocking to a lot of people, right?
It's flat. You look at the curve, it goes like this, and then it flats, and now it's going up again.
Yet, PG&E for 20 years have increased their spending by 400% in the face of flat demand. So they spend more money because that's how they earn a profit. If they spent the same amount year after year to maintain the same sized grid and to deliver the same amount of electrons, they would post the same profits.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make Wall Street happy.
Or their executives.
Exactly. So what do? They come up with excuses to spend money. It's like if they treat ratepayers like an ATM machine. They just go, we need more money, and we just print money for them. They earn higher profits year after year because they spend more money year after year, despite the fact that the demand for their product has been flat and has always been pretty unaffordable, but has become unaffordable to a crisis level. And so what they have done is they have invented this boogeyman, and they have tried to shift the blame away from them. And they've tried to create, and they've successfully created this narrative that says, you know what, we're entitled to every dollar we spend. So we're entitled to that 400% increase. It is needed. We need to keep the lights on. We need to keep the grid safe. We need to meet renewable energy mandates. We need to stop wildfires. We need to spend. It's all justified. How dare you even question? And there's no regulator in the state that has the technical chops or the political power to stand up to these utilities when they own Sacramento, right? Yeah. Through their campaign contributions. So we are entitled to spend whatever we want, however we want, and nobody can audit us, and nobody can tell us no. And if you dare to not pitch in, if you don't pitch in to cover our ballooning costs, you're the one at fault. It's not us. It's not that we can't rein in our spending and live within a flat market like every other business. We just need to make you pay. And that's the cost shift. We are entitled to every penny. And if you're not paying, somebody else is.
And so just through course of owning the regulators, they managed to get this bad decision made that eliminated net metering. They call it the net billing tariff. There's no net anything. I mean, you get pennies instead of 34 cents. It's meaningless. But then what is the basis of the lawsuit?
Well, let me first give credit to Environmental Working Group is one of 3 groups, and we work as a tight-knit coalition. The other 2 groups are Center for Biological Diversity and then the Protect Our Communities Foundation down in San Diego. So the 3 groups are intrepid and committed to winning this lawsuit. So what is really, really interesting, if you take a step back, is the legislature in the state of California has, in our Constitution, has supreme power over the PUC. So whatever the legislature says, the PUC has to follow.
And the PUC is kind of the executive.
It's the executive branch, exactly.
This is starting to sound federally familiar.
Yes, exactly. So we created the PUC in the state of California. We created this agency whose sole job is to protect consumers from the utility. That's their only job. Mm-hmm. And when we created them, we said, okay, we're tasking you with this job, but the legislature is more powerful than you, essentially. And then in 1998, we went a step further as the legislature, and we said, not only is the legislature more powerful than this state agency, but the courts are more powerful than the state agency. And we specifically directed the courts to oversee every decision that the PUC makes. And whenever the PUC makes a decision, it's the court's duty to look at the statute, read the statute, the words of the legislature, and determine, did the public agency do it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is their job. And so our lawsuit basically says the legislature wanted to see rooftop solar grow. They wanted to see consumers have access to clean energy. They wanted to see consumers save money by investing in clean energy. And the PUC basically ignored the direction of the legislature when they came up with this awful decision that clearly ripped solar out of the hands of most people. And the court has to now review the statute and come up with an independent decision of whether we're right in our accusation that they broke the law. And what's interesting here, and I'm getting a little bit in the weeds, but we filed this lawsuit back in 2023, and the Court of Appeal, the California Court of Appeal, took the case up, but they disagreed with us, and we lost. On the round 1, we lost. And the reason why they disagreed with us is because they ignored that 1998 law I mentioned earlier. And that 1998 law said, courts, you can't defer to the PUC. You have to read the statute and decide on your own whether they followed the law. Whereas that court in 2023 basically said, the PUC is a technical agency. They have a lot of technical expertise. We're going to defer to them on these really seemingly technical matters, you know, about the cost shift and electricity and rooftop solar. And it all seemed technical. And so the court said, we're just not going to deal with it. We're not going to overturn it. We don't see any kind of gross negligence here. The decision stands. We then said, well, you're ignoring this law in 1998. And so we're going to appeal. So we appealed to the California State Supreme Court. And we said the lower court got it wrong. They ignored this 1998 law, and they're abdicating their duty as a court. The Supreme Court agreed with us. So in August of this year, 2025, we won. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, these guys are right. The courts have to review what the law says and decide whether and not give any deference to the agency. So now,
so it sounds like we won.
Yeah,
you know,
huge
yeah.
victory.
But so what does
that mean?
What does that
so
mean?
So now we're back to the Court of Appeal. So the Supreme Court said, Court of Appeal, you need to take another look at this, and you need to like wipe your brain free of what, you know, clean the slate and re-look. And so what is so interesting is if you actually read the law that's been on the books since 2013, the legislature is very clear in what they want. They want rooftop solar to continue to grow. They want the system to be protected, the investment from the consumer to be protected for, the life of the system. And they want the Public Utilities Commission to value everything that this rooftop solar brings to California. So what is its value to the overall grid, right? What we were talking about before, how it's actually beneficial to put energy down in where it's being used, right? How does that help the grid? What is that? How are the benefits to all of society? What are the environmental benefits? And what are the benefits to consumers? And not just the consumers that have gone solar, but the millions more that want to go solar in the future. So the legislature's instructions are really detailed and they're very clear. They didn't just say, PUC, figure it out. We don't care how you go about doing, taking on this task. They gave the PUC very specific instructions. And in 2016, under the Jerry Brown administration, we saw the first iteration of this, successor tariff, new net metering program. And the PUC, if you read that decision, they adhere to the law pretty darn well. They go, all right, well, this is what the legislature told us to do. We've got to color in the lines.
Yeah, we had net billing and we had net metering too. And there was a, whatever that net, there was the chart.
Non-bypassable.
Right. We had the non-bypassable charge in net metering too. And that was manageable.
It was manageable.
Not totally fair, but fair enough. And then what happened?
So then the utilities got mad because they wanted to win bigger in 2016. They thought they were going to just do away with rooftop solar. They didn't. So they manufactured this whole cost shift campaign and they hired this fancy PR firm. And not only did they go after rooftop solar in a negative way, claiming the cost shift, claiming that it's unequitable and bad for poor people, as if these utilities are really champions of poor people, but they also concurrently said, we got to be for something. So we're for utility scale solar. That utility scale solar, that's good. We like that. It's, cheaper. It's for everybody. It's not private. It's basically public. And so they went to town promoting utility scale at the same time that they disparaged and fought against rooftop. And that was sort of the secret recipe for them, because prior to that, they sort of seemed like Neanderthals, in the energy space. They were just against everything. Mm-hmm. But once they became for something, they could then rally businesses that are in the utility scale side. They could rally unions that were building the utility scale projects, and they could rally environmental groups who just wanted to be for something that had political power behind it, right? So a lot of groups just jumped on the utility scale kind of uber alles bandwagon and joined this kind of negative choir against rooftop. Rooftop started to seem like, well, that has everybody against it. So I'm going to be for the thing that everybody's for. And so it started to shape this. And then, you have a new governor who just doesn't really care that much. It's just not his issue.
He's really good on other issues, but it's also a big source of funding for him.
And that's how this Public Utilities Commission circa 2022, the evolution of this agency that just thought they were above the law. I mean, they've just completely gone rogue. I mean, if you read their decision that we've sued over, it barely even mentions the statute. They instead invent these other things, like they invent this study. They hired a firm to do a study called the look back study. And that's what they reference in the decision. They reference a study that they commissioned to say what they wanted it to say. And then on top of that, they came up with these goals and policy priorities that have nothing to do with what the legislature told them to do, and that just create a smokescreen, basically, to hide.
What are the big arguments that we're using in this lawsuit to appeal this? How are we going to convince the Supreme Court to change their mind?
Well, one of the things I am enjoying pointing out, because it's not that wonky if you just settle in and think about it for a second. The way that the utilities, with the help of the Public Utilities Commission, have invented this cost shift of, up to several $1 billion, is they created their own test. They created it just for their own benefit. It's not like it's it's not like it's a test that everybody agrees is a good test of cost and benefits of rooftop solar. And this test is a no-win test. There's no way, the way this test is set up, for any kind of rooftop solar system to pencil out. It's impossible, because what the test does is it says the cost of rooftop solar is lost revenue by the utilities, i.e. retail rates. So right now in PG&E, that's what? Anywhere from 40 cents to 60 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah, looking at it, excluding care, it looks like it's about 45 cents on the average per kilowatt hour.
Okay. So that's if you envision a scale, right? One side is lost revenue, utilities lost revenue valued at retail. So very high price, right, per kilowatt hour. The other side, the benefit side, is what is the utilities avoided costs measured at wholesale? So this is where you get 5 cents is all.
That's their generation cost. Did somebody forgot about the transmission, distribution, profits, all the other stuff?
And they say, well, we're not really avoiding any transmission because they only look at near-term avoidance instead of long-term over the next 20 years, what are we going to avoid? So they play accounting games. But even if they didn't play accounting games, it's still retail versus wholesale. So there's no way for rooftop solar, even a complete battery, just a system with 5 batteries, and you never export a single electron, right? You just self-generate, and it's a non-export system.
Energy efficiency. You're saving your own energy.
That's even worse. That fares worse than a simple standalone solar system because it's even bigger lost revenue. And so this test, if you look at it on the face of it, it is so clearly rigged. All it is a test to measure lost profits for the utilities. It is not a test to measure whether it is good for society to see our neighbors invest in rooftop solar and share it with their next door neighbor and reduce our use of this electric grid that is strained and struggling, right, to keep the lights on. It is not an appropriate measure at all. And the legislature was clear that they did not want the PUC to use that very test. In fact, that language was struck from the bill before that bill was passed and signed into law. So they just ignored this and plowed right through it and said, we're going to do it anyway because we're above the law.
Once again, it sounds like what's going on in another part of the country. But anyway, so what's the timing for this legal brief? I understand it was filed, and how long is it going to take to get some kind of resolution?
So we're in this, slow motion argument where we filed opening briefs at the end of 2025, and at the beginning of 2026, we'll file reply briefs where we respond to each other. We then will wait to hear if the court, and it's a panel of 3 judges, whether they want to do oral arguments. And then there's a decision. And we expect it to be sometime at the end of Q1 or early Q2 of 2026.
And what could the potential decision be as far as what could a remedy be that would be fair to ratepayers?
So the decision will either be, yes, you broke the law, or no, you didn't break the law. Mm-hmm. Pretty cut and dry. There's not really any negotiating from there. So if they decide that our side is right, is correct, the PUC did break the law, then the net metering 3.0 decision is thrown out the window. And what's most likely to happen is everybody moves on back. We resurrect an M 2.0. And we know that tariff already exists. It's in use, so that won't be that hard. Everybody that's on the NEM 3.0, the NBT or whatever this has gone solar since 2023, they will be automatically put on the NEM 2.0 tariff. And then it'll be up to the PUC to open up another proceeding if they want to make further modifications and have another bite at that. But they're going to have to do it in a way that, comports with the law.
All right. There's a lot to digest there. It's enormously important, really, to anybody in California that has solar or had solar or is looking into it. And since these kind of bad PUC decisions and bad utility actions are spreading across the country, it has a national.
That's right. And it's much bigger even than net metering because this is an agency that has gone rogue. And they've gone rogue in ways that are unhelpful to ratepayers. And so we're breaking this open and we're bringing real accountability to this powerful and important agency. And that's going to sort of give lift to the public interest on all sorts of issues because for the first time in over 100 years, this powerful state agency is going to be held accountable.
That is an enormous defensive battle that we in the solar industry in California and ultimately throughout the country are going to fight. Let's talk about something offensive. And the concept is something that's we call balcony solar, or also known as plug-in solar. What is balcony solar or plug-in solar, and why is that even important to us?
I'm so excited about this idea. So balcony solar, I like to call it balcony solar because everybody knows what a balcony is. It conjures up an average person on the street's mind. Oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. It is sometimes also called plug-in solar. Basically, it's just a version of solar that we're all familiar with that is portable, and that is because solar panels are modular and you can just do smaller systems. You can just hang it over a balcony railing. You can put it on a little tripod and put it out on a patio or a back deck, lean it up against the back fence, and you can run a 3-prong cord to an electrical outlet and plug it in. That's all you need. You don't need to get, utility permission. You don't need to get building permits. You don't need to, spend a lot of money for, somewhere between $500 and $600 per panel. You can just plug it in and start generating. And the way electricity works, which you've taught me, Barry, is it's just multi-directional. Electricity, we think of it as consumers as being unidirectional because we're just always consumers. But when you plug a solar panel into an outlet, it just immediately, those electrons flow inward direction, and they'll just immediately start powering whatever appliances you have on.
And then you don't have to buy those electrons from the utility, so you're actually saving money, and it makes a tremendous amount of sense. Who's against that? What's the problem?
Well, the utilities right out of the gate. So even when, this is something that has sprung up and become very, very popular in Germany. Germans, back when the Ukraine war started truly, springing up, because there's so much connection between energy and natural gas in Ukraine and the economy of Europe, energy prices went through the roof. And there was just this sense of, we don't want to buy gas from Russia. Russia's an aggressor, right? So there was this kind of cultural, political, and economic movement to go even deeper on rooftop solar in Germany. Germany's already one of the largest markets for rooftop, traditional mounted rooftop solar systems. But there are a lot of people in apartments that don't have control of their roof, who maybe just have access to a small patch of sunlight. They got into the game. And so in Germany, we saw over the past 4 years, we've seen this explosion in the market of balcony solar. And it's only recently that idea has sort of jumped the pond and come over to the United States. And we had this really interesting development of a Republican representative in the state of Utah read about balcony solar, I think in the New York Times, and he said, why don't we do that here? So he, on his own, just introduced a bill and got it through the Utah state legislature, and it turned into a law in Utah this last summer. And so that has sort of opened up a lot of political opportunity to do this all throughout the United States.
So that sounds good. You can get a mail order. You can probably go to Costco or Home Depot or Best Buy and buy a few solar panels and plug it into this box. And who's going to stop me from plugging it in? I plug in a toaster. I can plug in any kind of appliance. Where's the problem? What do we need legislation for?
So the utilities, right out of the gate, I got distracted. So the minute Utah passed, and there started to be local news stories about this interesting, additional way to go solar, the utilities got the PUC, because they're like best buddies, and they immediately organized a meeting of the different utilities and of the regulators. And they declared, oh, no, we cannot let these people do this. They have to sign an interconnection agreement. They have to pay us $150 to do that. They have to get inspected. It has to be installed by a professional, electrician. This is our world, and we have to have say.
That's amazing. I mean, it's like the supermarkets would say you can't have a vegetable garden in your backyard. How could they possibly get away with that?
Right. I mean, they'll claim safety and hazards and all this, but I think most politicians in California are so eager to deliver real affordability to their constituents. And I think this messaging around the utility trying to get in the way of consumers just plugging into the sun, I think it's just not going to fly. So the legislation is needed just to make it crystal clear, right? Because if the utilities and the Public Utilities Commission under the current administration had their say, they would absolutely get in the way of consumers doing this. And they would load it up with red tape and costs and unnecessary.
Like it already is.
Yes, exactly. So we need the legislature to say, no, this is an appliance. It is a portable device. It doesn't need all of that red tape. And just you're free to move about the cabin. You know, you're free consumers to plug into the sun, and to have that kind of blessing from the legislature, just get the monkey off our backs, is what's really needed.
So what are we doing in California about this?
So we're hoping to be announcing a new legislation in California. I have to say there's about a half a dozen other states all around the country that are also going to be introducing legislation. New York, Vermont, Maine, North Carolina, Colorado, even maybe Alaska, in addition to, of course, Utah already exists. So we're going to see states all around the country jumping in on this exciting new market. And the thing I'm most excited about is this cost shift argument. When you start to talk to people about balcony solar and they envision this is somebody who's a renter living in a high-rise multi-family apartment building, slinging a panel over a balcony railing to catch that south-facing sun to power their air conditioner on a hot summer day, where is the cost shift in that? If you apply the same cost shift math, that scale we talked about, it is 100% a cost shift. Every electron that renter living in a high-rise in Santa Cruz or Oakland or wherever, every electron they don't buy from PG&E is a cost shift. But I think when most people see it from this different vantage point, from this point of somebody is just plugging a portable, mobile solar panel into an electrical outlet to power the air conditioner on the other side, that is nothing but self-sufficiency. That is nothing but energy freedom. That is nothing but no-brainer, common sense, here's what I do because this product that PG&E is providing is way too expensive, it's way too unreliable, and it's way too dangerous. And you can't get in the way of that and call that a cost shift with a straight face. So I'm hopeful that we can not only open up this market to millions more Californians that currently don't have, control of their roof, but also we can blow up this cost shift mythology and get people to realize that they were under some spell and there's no truth to it.
There's a tremendous amount of excitement about this. And I've got neighbors that are putting it in and other people. It makes so much sense. You can save a little bit of money on your electric bill, and the more panels you put in, the more balcony solar you put in, better. But if you kind of go through what you need to do to follow all the utility rules, you need to get a building permit. You need to get a local building inspection. That could be $1,000 or $2,000. You need to get an interconnection with the utility. That $500 to $1,000. But not only, it's not just the money, it's taking like 2 or 3 months just to get the interconnection. And then you've got Big Brother Utility looking over your head and kind of going through all this complicated billing. It's crazy. It's kind of like saying you can't buy a tomato plant at Home Depot so you can have a healthier, cheaper salad. You've got to buy everything through the supermarket. It makes no sense at all.
That's right. That's right.
Makes no sense at all.
It makes no sense at all. And I think what I'm also excited about this balcony solar issue is that what we've seen in Germany is that once people get a taste for generating their own electricity, for that, self-reliance and that freedom, they just start to look for ways to do more of it. So I think we'll bring that, they can bring their solar panels with them when they move into their first starter home, and then they'll add and they'll put one on the roof, and they'll really become self-sufficient. It'll be sort of a feeder for reinvigorating the rooftop.
I kind of look at it, balcony solar is a gateway drug to, okay, if you got a balcony in an apartment, great, do that. But when you move to a house, or if you have a house, instead of trying to put a few panels in, put 20 on your roof and eliminate your electric bill altogether. It makes total sense.
And people will get it. It's addicting. Once you see that, you get the phone app and you start to see that panel is generating X amount of electricity right now. Yep. You just want more of that. It's just too good. So I think we'll see more people. We'll see our market grow, and we'll also address a market that some people are kind of locked out of.
All right. Well, we've covered two terrific ideas, and you're kind of spearheading those. I have a crazy idea of my own, and that would be trying to resolve the issue with data centers that are requiring enormous amounts of power for AI. And you got EVs growing, you've got electrification. And these data centers have tons of money. But in the meantime, when that power is provided by the utility, it causes rates to go through the roof. So, kind of the crazy idea I had is let's find a way to have the data center companies directly pay for a enormous full-scale rollout of residential and commercial solar in the neighborhood of the data centers. So basically you're putting that onto the local grid. You can use net metering, you could use something like a feed-in tariff so that the data centers would see how much power they're getting and then they would reimburse the homeowners, and you would really spur that. How could that possibly work out? You're the policy genius in the country.
Well, I love this idea. I think it's an obvious solution to a growing problem. If for no other reason that, even if you like nuclear technology and you believe these modular, new modular plants are going to actually come to market, I highly doubt anybody wants a modular nuclear power plant by their kids' elementary school. But these data centers, as we sit here in the heart of Silicon Valley, they are in our communities and they need power right now, right? The most obvious thing to do, which is the heart of your idea, Barry, is to make use of all of the sunshine that's falling on the acreage surrounding these data centers and tap into the warehouses, the rooftops, the parking lots, and power that energy locally, because the grid can't handle it. And the grid really can't. Even if the utilities want to build a bigger grid, they're just going to be stymied. I mean, the level of growth.
But the utilities saying we can do all that. But then when you kind of drill down into it, it's like, oh, well, it's going to take 10 years to get the transmission lines built. Oh, maybe we're going to build a natural gas plant. Oh, 7-year wait from GE to get a gas turbine. And you mentioned nuclear. I mean, that's a great idea. But the last plant we built in the US took 20 years and over $20 billion. So it's not going to happen until I'm 90 years old.
Right. And EWG doesn't actually think nuclear is a good idea because we have this little pesky problem called nuclear waste that has never been addressed. But putting that aside, even if you don't want to go down that argument, it's not something you're going to put in a neighborhood. And so I love your idea. I think it is absolutely what California politicians should be embracing. I think it could absolutely be done through a feed-in tariff. There's no reason why it can't. I mean, the grid is already down in our communities. The grid has basically been built. And those wires, that same wire inside your home that can be bidirectional, that can be bidirectional at a neighborhood level. So there's absolutely, and we're soon to release an analysis that shows we could build 100 gigawatts of distributed solar in California. Easy.
And that's perfect. That would feed more than, I think we've got 160 gigawatts of demand for electricity in California, and that would cover it.
So we could do this in a distributed fashion. A lot of people go, oh, well, rooftop solar is really nice. They kind of pat it on the head, but if we're really going to run our economy, we need those huge plants out in the desert, and the rooftop can kind of fill in the gaps like sand around rocks. It's quite the opposite. Rooftop could power our state, and we could have a handful of larger facilities out on the perimeter to fill in the gaps when we need.
And those would be expensive facilities. They're going to take 10 years to build. All right. We talked a lot about some great energy concepts. Let's get a little bit political. 2026 is an election year here in California for new governor. What should we be looking for in a potential new governor in California?
Number one thing is, have they taken a lot of money from the utilities and the utilities affiliated groups? That would be the number one thing. And I think it's very interesting to look at who has taken money and who hasn't.
That narrows it down considerably.
That narrows it down. And then I would say, who has a track record of standing up for consumers? Who is going to be free thinking enough to stand up to the utilities and to stand up to sort of their political machine that they have built, and just say no. And it's a small group of people that are really willing to fight for the public interest.
Yeah, it'll be a very, very interesting election year. There's lots of people throwing their hats into the ring. Anything else you'd like to discuss as far as things going on at Environmental Working Group?
I mean, it's a nonprofit, so I always have my hand out. If anybody wants to donate, we have actually a solar legal defense fund set up. You can find it through our LinkedIn website or through Facebook. But we're asking people to donate to help us cover our legal fees because this lawsuit, of course, lawsuits are expensive, and it's all being funded by EWG along with our coalition partners. So
What's the URL for people to check out?
it's it's ewg.org is our main website. So again, E for environmental, W working group, G. And then I don't actually know our handle on LinkedIn, but if you just search Environmental Working Group, it'll pop right up.
Okay, we talked about lots of good things and lots of crazy things. What's your message of hope for solar enthusiasts and environmentalists?
You know, one of the things that has me extremely hopeful, both on energy as well as the other issue area that EWG works on, which is public health and toxics. And that is that we are kind of going through a bit of a, almost like a renaissance in public awareness of these issues and public engagement on them. You know, whether it's kind of traditional folks on the left that traditionally vote Democratic, caring about, you know, forever chemicals or caring about solar energy, or if you go all the way to the right on the political spectrum and it's MAHA, you know, Make America Healthy Again, and folks that are right now really fighting for strong public health standards, we're all in this together. And what we have found is that when you work on these issues about making our communities safer and healthier, making our food healthier, making our energy safer and more affordable, increasing energy independence and freedom, this is across the board. Everybody nods their head yes, everybody. And so we can get bipartisan support. We can get, you know, strong votes in our favor. And the more people engage, the more power we build and the more change we can create. So I'm actually kind of bullish right now because of that. People are kind of reawakened to, I don't mean to sound anti-government, but in a whole number of ways, our government is kind of asleep at the wheel.
Well, yeah, if we don't do these things, you know, you mentioned Renaissance. That's when we got out of the Dark Ages. We're kind of going back towards the Dark Ages in terms of poor public health, Dark Ages in terms of energy and affordability, Dark Ages in terms of education. So there's lots and lots of opportunities. It might take 3 or 4 years to get there, but it's
There's
all
the
for the right
makings
thing and it
of
makes sense.
a groundswell of public interest in these issues and people wanting to be engaged. So,
All right. On that note, that's all the time we have on this week's Energy Show. Thanks, Bernadette, for joining me again. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. If you missed any of today's show, you can always go to our website at energyshow.biz and listen to the podcasts.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's Energy Show.